Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 3rd, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Washington Post political correspondent Dave Weigel will be on the program live from Iowa. Why? What's that? Oh, it's the Iowa caucuses today. Cannot believe we're finally here, folks. Meanwhile, after the Republicans block witnesses for the Senate impeachment trial, final arguments have begun today. And we'll talk about why they waited until Wednesday to acquit. And they could have wrapped this thing up on Friday or Saturday. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's best friends forever and the Republican Party want to start impeaching him now over Ukraine. John Kerry apparently would have run for president this cycle, but for a bank gig and some sweet conditions for windsurfing. Congratulations, you paid for Trump's Super Bowl party. You can call in and tell us how it was. Meanwhile, Trump adds 6 countries to his racist travel ban. Trump administration also rolls back restrictions on U.S. use of landmines. The House is to have a key vote on Medicaid block grants, a vote that could rival those ones on witnesses when it comes to the Democrats taking the Senate back in the fall. Meanwhile, Senate investigators interviewed the IRS whistleblower who claims interference with the Trump and Pence audits. The DNC changes the rules for debates. The only possible beneficiary? Me, Mike Bloomberg. Talib boos Clinton and all hell breaks loose. Meanwhile, the coronavirus is close to pandemic. And the NOAA, the NOAA emails over that hurricane that was about to crash into southern states in this country show the damage.
Like Alabama?
Well, not quite. Exactly. The Mad King has wrought on our government, just even on the weather, as it were. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Jamie is still recuperating from the flu. Michael is down in Washington, D.C., I guess doing coverage with the folks from the Hill for the Iowa. I don't know if it started already. I don't think so. I think it starts tonight. Sadly, most of you will be watching coverage on this station, where we will be having conversations with Ryan Grimm. Nomi Konst will be here, holding down the anchor desk. Is that what we call it?
Co-captain.
Co-captaining the.
Brendan likes maritime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Co-captaining this ship, and of course, we will also welcome aboard Ryan Grimm via
All right.
via the foghorn. And Bobby Big Wheel from the internets and the Future Now, Aaron Kleinman, will be joining us via phone. And, of course, we'll have multiple appearances from John from San Antonio giving us his numbers. He was going at it with Nate Silver on Twitter, big time.
I feel bad for Nate Silver.
Yeah, sorry, Nate. We may have other special guests tonight in our coverage. We're moderately committed to staying up until this thing is resolved in Iowa, and we will be debating that question as we go on. We'll have a bunch of videos. We'll have a fun time tonight. And, of course, we will be here tomorrow night, too, for the State of the Union. We may or may not have a show tomorrow at the regularly scheduled time. We'll find out. We're also doing, of course, the debate coverage live on Friday night. The impeachment hearings we'll be talking about, or the final vote we'll be talking about on Wednesday. I'm not sure exactly when that'll happen. My guess is maybe 10 or 11 in the morning, but we don't know. We will get around to impeachment more, but I'll just tell you what my theory is. And I hopped on YouTube after the vote Friday and went down a list of about 7 states, and the numbers I don't have right in front of me, but they start with Colorado, where by last measure, Donald Trump had a negative 14 percentage points favorability rating. And then I think the next was Iowa. I think that was 6 points. Forgive me, this is off the top of my head, so I may get these numbers screwed up. But between Arizona, Georgia, Maine, and Iowa, you have Trump at somewhere between -6 and -2 on favorability. Then North Carolina, he's tied in terms of favorability. All those senators, Collins in Maine, Loeffler, or whoever it's going to be, or Isaacson, not Isaacson, but Perdue. And remember, Doug Collins is running against Loeffler, who was appointed, and she was appointed because she was going to appeal to the non-crazies in Georgia. But now she has to act like a crazy to beat Doug Collins. And there's no guarantee that she will. But if she does, then she's stuck with all the craziness that she's had to exhibit, and her vote did not even allow witnesses in. So they're worried about Georgia. Remember, had they not stolen that election, meanwhile, Stacey Abrams has been down there and she's been continuing to register people. Had they not stolen that election against Stacey Abrams, she would be governor right now. North Carolina, Tom Tillis is nervous. As you move west, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Martha McSally in Arizona, Cory Gardner in Colorado, Sullivan in Alaska may be a little bit nervous. That's why Murkowski voted to not have witnesses. She was only going to vote to have witnesses if they could have had witnesses. When it became clear that they weren't going to get 4, they were just going to have 3, I think she voted to not have witnesses to protect Sullivan, who had to vote to block witnesses. And then all of these same senators that I have just mentioned, they're all going to have to take a vote against Medicaid. And we'll get to that later, but as you know, Donald Trump's administration just decided to start blocking or block granting Medicaid, or allowing states to get it as a block grant. They do a waiver, so all the Republican states are going to do this. And when they block grant, not only do they get less money, doesn't grow with the need that's in the state, but then the state is basically unshackled, as it were, by any strings that the federal government puts on that money. And so they can start to add new restrictions, basically kicking people off the Medicaid rolls. And they can use that money for anything that they want, ultimately. We're going to get a couple experts on to talk about this more. But the bottom line is the House is going to vote to prevent the Trump administration from block granting. And then it's going to go to the Senate, where the senators are going to have to vote on it. So Tom Tillis, places where Medicaid has expanded and people are happy about it, Tom Tillis is going to have a real problem with that vote. There's a couple others. And we will talk about that at length, maybe later in the show. Meanwhile, turning to Iowa, here is Joe Biden. Now, when we talk to Weigel, I suspect we're going to hear a lot about it's all about electability. But Biden has been trying to make it like I'm the guy who not only gets elected, but I'm the guy who's going to go in, and because Donald Trump is going to go away, I'm the guy who could talk to Republicans. I'm like the Republican whisperer. Sort of undercut his argument this week when basically half the Republicans in the Senate said, oh, we're going to impeach Joe Biden, and we're also going to put his son on trial. And here he is asked the question on the Today Show with, what is this, Savannah Guthrie? Is that her name? Okay.
Let's talk about impeachment. The Republicans are on track to acquit the president this week. You've been someone who's talked about being able to work across the aisle. Is there anything about how this impeachment trial has unfolded that has shaken your faith in your ability to work with the Mitch McConnell or Republicans?
It hasn't shaken my faith in being able to work with at least somewhere between 7 and 15 of the Republicans are there.
Pause it. Now, incidentally, I don't know if I have it on my board. Oh, yeah, here it is. That's not what Joe Biden's been saying, incidentally. I mean, just for those of you who haven't been paying attention, he's not been saying, I can work with 7 to 15 Republicans in the House. I mean, in the Senate. He's been saying I can work with the Republicans. Now, of course, that's on some level what it means. But now he's got to get a little more specific, and he's got to sort of narrow this window a little bit. And again, there's nothing to indicate that Republicans are going to break ranks. Mitt Romney, who apparently everybody in the Republican caucus hates because he's such an annoying guy and walks, the idea that he walks amongst mortals, I think is sort of rubs other people in the wrong way. It was Mitt Romney and Susan Collins, who is basically her existence in the Senate is on life support, and they all know it, who broke with the Republican Party, not on exonerating Donald Trump, but just on witnesses. On nothing. Virtually nothing. The pressure on Republicans is so great. He's just out of touch. But let's let him explain more gibberish.
15 of the Republicans are there. I think you're going to see the world change with Trump gone.
So you think you can work with Mitch McConnell still? I
think on certain things I can work with. And my hope is he won't be majority leader any longer. Because the other
pause it. No, wait a second. First off, I don't know what Joe Biden thinks happens when someone loses as a first-term president. But there's not going to be aliens coming down with a tractor beam that's going to take Donald Trump and take him up into a different universe. Donald Trump is going to go and he's going to start some TV network, and all he's going to do is make any Republican who steps out of line with what Donald Trump still wants pay a huge price. It's arguable the pressure may even be greater with him outside of office. Probably not, but I'm not so convinced. Donald Trump won because of Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and all of these radio talkers who have been mutating the Republican Party with the help of Republican lawmakers. So the fact that he moves into that position is not going to change anything. And then Joe Biden working with Mitch McConnell. Well, I don't have to worry about that because I'm hoping the Democrats take the Senate. Well, if the Democrats take the Senate, then what's the value being able to work with Republicans for you? We don't need those 7 to 15 anymore.
And my hope is he won't be majority leader any longer. Because the other thing I think is important is who's going to be able to go in and help Democrats win back the Senate.
Has it occurred to you that there's a certain irony here that the president is accused of and has acknowledged wanting to get information about your son Hunter and his dealings with Ukraine, and this process of impeachment has ensured that everyone knows about Hunter's dealings with Ukraine.
That's a good thing, and no one's found anything wrong with his dealings with Ukraine except they say it sets a bad image.
Well, do you agree that it sets a bad image?
And my son said that.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Don't you think that
pause it. Wait a second. Can we just look at that body language? We got to bring our body language expert into this. Here's Joe Biden like leaning in. Savannah Guthrie's like, whoa. Here we go.
With his dealings with Ukraine, except they say it sets a bad image.
Well, do you agree that it sets a bad image?
And my son said that.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Don't you think that it's just one of those things where people think, well, that seems kind of sleazy. Why would he have that job if not for who his father was?
Because he's a very bright guy.
I guess the question I'm kind of asking is, was it right?
His appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he said he regretted having done it.
Yeah.
Speaks for himself. He's a grown man.
You gonna predict a win tomorrow night?
I don't predict wins because I'm superstitious, but I predict we'll do very well.
All right. They have a weird cut. I just want to be clear. That is a NBC cut when he says, like, he's a bright guy. And then they cut very quickly. So I don't know.
Which makes me think they might be saving face for him, that it got worse.
There's a lot of cuts in that.
It's unclear. I would like to see the raw footage. Maybe they'll put it on their website at one point, or maybe they won't. I don't know. But I mean, here's the bottom line. He's not going to get out from under this. You could be the greatest Joe Biden supporter in the world and say it's completely unfair. He can't control his son. Totally agree. I have kids, believe me. They don't do anything I want them to do. It's very easy for me to imagine that someday Mila's going to be out there and trying to take advantage of my name in some fashion. Going around, like, I don't know, going into like Just Coffee and seeing if she can get a free cup of coffee or something like that, trading off my name in some fashion. But the idea is that it's you can't control your kid, but maybe Joe Biden should have said to the administration at the time, like, I might not be the greatest guy to do this because I can't get my son, or I'm going to call my son and say, look, you're making it impossible for me to do my job. Now, I understand Joe Biden's in even a tougher situation because of everything that went on with his wife and his other child who died in that car accident. So maybe he doesn't feel like he has that leverage. But at one point or another, you have to make you have to make a decision. You're either going to try and leverage it with the kid, or you're going to step back and say, I can't get involved in this. And he could come out with even maybe I don't know if there's an even more creative response to that. But the bottom line is there is no response that isn't going to keep a small percentage of Democrats, in the best case scenario, only a small percentage, from staying at home because they think that Joe Biden is just as corrupt as Donald Trump. And Joe Biden has tried to sell himself as the guy who's going to change that. That's the problem. If Joe Biden was up there and saying, like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, forget, you don't want to say Medicare for all, just say, like, I'm going to make 4-day work week. Joe Biden gets up there and he promotes a 4-day work week. One thing when you get Joe Biden, 4-day work week. If that was the fundamental bedrock of his campaign, then I think Joe Biden would be inoculated from the. It doesn't matter if you think I'm a little bit corrupt, because you're going to get a 4-day work week. Or it could just be like, I'm also making a federal rule that you can use the word chicks again in, amongst whatever it is.
Hell yeah. Dames.
Whatever it is that he would offer, if it was distinct from himself. When you're getting this guy, you're getting a guy who's not going to, you're not going to have to worry about this stuff, double dealing. The problem is he's doing the same thing that Clinton did, which was running on their personal attributes, running on their resume. And even if their resume is really strong, you're basically going to battle with a guy whose only skill is to undercut and make people think badly about you enough so that they don't come out. He is very great at throwing crap on people and making it stick. All right, I got to go. I got to get to these ads because we got Weigel holding. Let me just tell Weigel we're going to be there in a second. But that's the problem that Joe Biden has.
As the only lifeguard in the projects.
Hey, folks, what if there was a 50% off sale happening every time you went shopping for razors? What would you do? I know. I don't even have to ask you to.
Be smooth as a baby.
There you go. Well, shaving with Harry's is kind of like that. They offer premium blade refills for as low as $2 each. That's up to 55% off compared to the price of the Gillette Fusion Pro Shield. First of all, you also don't have to have like 3 names for your razors, right? They're constantly junking up the razors. It's like it's like you're Rambo. You know that scene where, I mean, I guess now that's a little bit dated, but like you're like Thanos or whatever it is. You get all your different utility belts on. For me, I love shaving with Harry's because it's simple. Sort of a classical design on the razor handle. I like the small razor head because it fits in my asymmetrical nostrils. It's a little secret. That's why I'm always looking down at the desk. I don't want to show that off. But Harry's doesn't inflate blade prices. They don't put these crappy, unnecessary features on their razors. Flex balls or whatever it is. Harry's is a return to the basics when it comes to this stuff. Good blades, fair price. They get their steel from Sweden. They manufacture their blades in a world-class factory in Germany. If you don't love your shave, you let them know, they give you a 100% refund. And 1% of the proceeds are set aside for nonprofit organizations that are devoted to people, to providing people access to better healthcare for men's and veterans. Harry's has an amazing offer for our listeners of this show. New customers get $5 off a trial set at harrys.com/majority report. You get a 5-blade razor, a weighted handle, foaming shave gel with aloe, and a travel cover. You can join the millions of guys who've already made the switch. Go to Harrys, HARRYS.com/majority report to claim your offer. Also, as you know, hiring is challenging. There's a place where you can go where hiring is simple, it's fast, it's smart. Growing businesses connect to qualified candidates at ZipRecruiter. You've heard me talk about ZipRecruiter a lot. I'm not the only one who's had a great experience with it. Dylan Miskowitz, at Cafe Altura. Apparently he's the COO over there. Well, he experienced how challenging hiring can be after searching for a director of coffee. I don't even know what that is. I have no idea where you'd find someone like that for his organic coffee company. Then he switched to ZipRecruiter, saw an immediate difference. And you can too by signing up for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter finds candidates for you. Its technology identifies people with the right experience and invites them to apply to your job. It's like you get your own headhunter. So you get qualified candidates faster. After posting his job to ZipRecruiter, Dylan said he was amazed by how quickly great candidates were applying. He found his new director of coffee in just a few days. Folks, you don't need Dylan Miskowitz to tell you this. I can tell you. Sam Cedar at the Majority Report. Use ZipRecruiter to find the guy sitting right there. Brendan came in. Boom. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There was a lot of competition for Brendan's job. We got a ton of great recruits. But Brendan came in when I'm not going to tell you what he said because, next time I'm hiring, somebody will come in and say that. But you know what he said. Brendan, you know. With results like that, it's no wonder 4 out of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, it's the smartest way to hire. See why ZipRecruiter is effective for businesses of all size. Go to ZipRecruiter for free at our web address, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority, MAJORITY. And lastly, one of our sponsors today is News Voice. It's the first ever entirely open, crowdsourced, and democratized platform for news. You can download the app for free at newsvoice.com/majority. Look, the vast majority of our news is controlled by about 5 corporations. They split it up into small little other like little entities. But the bottom line is, if you want to be a good critical reader of media, you need to be able to compare how multiple outlets treat the same story. The easiest way for you to do that is newsvoice.com. It's a free, like I say, crowdsourced website and a mobile app. It lets you create personalized news feeds and maintain a clear picture of where your news is coming from and what political slants may exist, other sort of assumptions that they make. Helps you aggregate news from corporate outlets, international outlets, local news, and independent media. It gives you access to every side of every story. It's fueled by its community of users who contribute to the platform by fact-checking, submitting stories and sources that are missing, upvoting stories, and writing story summaries. You can even comment on stories and debate politics with other members of the community at News Voice. And the News Voice Play feature lets you listen to your personal news feed every day through customizable audio news playlists. It's like your own personally tailored radio station for news. News Voice is next generation news aggregator and social media platform that values transparency, good journalism, and productive political discussions. Get totally free access by going to newsvoice.com/majority. I put a link underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube and in our podcast description. All right, quick break, and then we'll be right back with Dave Weigel. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the Washington Post political correspondent, the author of the highly read, at least around here, I'm sure in other quarters too, email blast, the trailer, available at the Washington Post. Dave Weigel. Dave, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here. Thank you, man.
So you're in Iowa.
I am. I'm currently in the Des Moines Marriott downtown, which is the media hub of the caucuses. And in some ways, I think it's good for America that not every primary state has a place like this. It's certainly interesting. I mean, if you wander around the lobby, you can kind of get a story done, depending on which campaign people walk into the room.
So you must have, like, how many days would you say you've spent in Iowa just this cycle alone?
Easily 60, I think.
Wow. And
which is less than Iowans who spend 365, but, a lot compared to a lot of people who will have hot takes today. I mean, my hot takes will be informed or misinformed by spending a ton of time here. All right. So who's going to win? What are the numbers? Let's wrap this up quick. Andrew Yang is coming from that. No, I have no idea. I honestly, what's been interesting is that the Des Moines Register poll, which was buried, it did not leak per se, but enough people had chattered about what might have been in it, that expectations are set at Sanders winning, Biden doing pretty poorly, Warren and Buttigieg being somewhere in between, which is actually a fairly good mindset for people to go into if Biden does okay. I mean, if a former vice president of the United States who's been in politics for 50 years gets second place in Iowa, I think his campaign is ready to call it a victory in a place that was not very oriented towards him. But I think the people who support Sanders will laugh at that. But a lot depends on who comes third and fourth. And frankly, being around the state, I would say it feels like, obviously you're going to delete this if I'm wrong. You can just wipe the show, take the Sam Cedar show off YouTube. So that'd be cool. But if I'm wrong, forget it. But it felt like Warren picked up in the final week. There were people who had never written her off, but moved to other candidates who were taking a final look at her. Buttigieg has been pretty flat, but kept revving up these pretty decent-sized crowds. And Amy Klobuchar was pushing a storyline that she is surging at the last minute. I think it's true that she's a very popular second-choice candidate for a lot of people, and that she's going to pick up people who a month ago would have voted for Buttigieg or Biden. It's not clear that she did enough of that to get out of fifth place.
Wow. All right. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, we should tell people that the Des Moines Register has what is considered to be the gold standard poll, and they decided not to print it and release its results because one of the people who were administering the poll had changed the font size. Wait, what happened?
Okay. So, yeah, one of the people at the call center that was administering the poll, what we have learned is that they probably were reading the questions and expanded the font to the wrong size so that Buttigieg. Keep in mind they randomly read the names, so you're going to see a sheet with names, and then the next person you see the sheet's different. They might have left him off, not asked him, and they just happened. I mean, the odds are basically 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 that they were calling a Buttigieg voter. The Buttigieg voter was frustrated, or I can't characterize how to Tim her. They called the Buttigieg campaign, and the Buttigieg campaign called the Des Moines Register to say something's wrong with this poll. And so this is a situation that probably could have been resolved that night by the poll. Frankly, had the Buttigieg voter just said, "Hey, where's Buttigieg?" And they figured it out. But I'm not a pollster. I just kind of analyzed them, and the decision was just to say, well, if there's one flaw in this system, if the glove doesn't fit, like we're just not going to run the thing. But the effect that had is that there probably was going to be a poll on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, just leading discussion of Sunday shows. Tomorrow, am I talking about? Front page of the newspaper yesterday, leading discussion of Sunday shows that would have showed Sanders still ahead is with a rumor we have all heard. Yeah. There was not one, and so I think that added also to a sense that Sanders can never get a fair shake from the media. I mean, he was holding a big rally right when this was supposed to happen. That would have been a big deal for them, and they didn't get it. But it probably did again help Joe Biden because people in the know expect Sanders to win pretty decisively and don't expect much of Biden. If he does okay, he comes in a second that's pretty definitive, then hey,
I feel
people will say that they had a great night.
I feel like that's been the dynamic though for months. Is like if Biden, that if Biden comes in third or fourth in particular, he's in big trouble. As long as he comes in second, he's fine, and as long as he comes in like second or third in New Hampshire, he's fine because South Carolina was going to be his big firewall. It also appears, though, that firewall, I mean, it's hard, right? Because we just don't get enough polling out of these places.
And that's actually a real change from previous cycles, is despite this being very closely watched and competitive. I mean, I was just in my newsletter, the trailer, which I was going to hype at the end of the call, too. I've been in the run-up to Iowa and the run-up to New Hampshire, I'm kind of going through the history of previous caucuses and primaries to say what people got wrong about them, or how we remember correctly and incorrectly what happened. And there, even the Obama race, it was pretty clear. There were 3 candidates at the top. Obama was picking up steam. This has been really murky, but there's been less polling than there was in 2016, which was not as complicated a race. And a little bit of that, frankly, is there are fewer media resources to pay for polls, and a lot of the resources are going to impeachment polls and not to this. So we know less about the race in terms of data than we did before. Now, some campaigns have their own internal modeling, and if you talk to the campaigns, they generally feel pretty good about Sanders winning, and then a fight over who gets the 3 tickets behind him.
There is now, if I remember correctly, you were not somebody who was going to Iowa in 2004, right? I mean, that was a little before your time.
I wasn't. I never got there until 2007 when I started covering Republicans and Democrats there.
Have you asked people, because there's a comparison to be made in terms of Dean and Sanders, at least in the narrow sense of Dean had a lot of outside volunteers come in. Now, I imagine Sanders has more Iowan support. It's just that he also has an enormous amount of, I think, volunteers coming from outside. They've called, they superseded their own estimates in terms of what they wanted to call by, it seems like, millions of calls. There was one narrative that came out of that 2004 thing with Dean, and I don't know if I ever believed it, but one of the narratives like Iowans just got sick of the college kids coming in. Have you brushed up about? Have people said that in terms of Dean, or is that just like people just sort of running out of stuff to write about?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I tackled in the newsletter because that was not as much of a problem for Dean. Now, any campaign can have canvassers come and they don't do a great job. People made fun of the orange perfect storm hats. The campaign branded their volunteers in a way the campaigns don't usually do. I mean, I think they claimed about 3,500 volunteers in the state, coming from out of state, I should say, whereas which was less than they had hoped for. They asked for 5,000, they got 3,500. The Sanders campaign has more than 2,000, and it is not a problem for people. I mean, canvassers are not, hi, I'm from here and I'm going to lecture you. The Sanders strategy has been more persuasion at the door, having conversations. When you talk to Sanders volunteers, this is a thing that's very interesting to report, but it's as a reporter, you can't just interview people working for the campaign and say, have them rat out voters, but you can get a sense of what they've been saying, and they'll say, yeah, at the door, somebody was on our list. They infrequently caucus. We talked about Medicare for all for 15 minutes, and we marked them off because they seemed convinced by Sanders, and that's not what Dean did. But the problem for Dean, which is not repeated by anyone this year, is let's relive 2004 again. I mean, he was not like a left-wing candidate. Howard Dean was a fiscally conservative governor of Vermont, and when he started running, he was I'm going to run as a fiscal conservative who will bring universal health care responsibly. Then Iraq happened, and he became a left-wing candidate. So he was very vulnerable to attacks both on the war position by people like Joe Lieberman, and then from the left by people like Dick Gephardt and John Edwards on, hey, this guy has said in the past that Social Security should be on the table. Which he did. And so he got brought down by a crush of voter confidence in, is this guy reliable? Is he a real Democrat? Which is not a problem for Sanders. And frankly, Sanders has not been facing attacks. There have been a couple of negative ads on the air, more negative ads against Biden by Republican groups than one negative ad by a Democratic group against Sanders, which you have seen. Well, if you're in Iowa, you see the ad of 6 Democrats worrying very sincerely worrying that Sanders is too old and unelectable. You see that a little bit, but I mean, in 2004, it was like a rampage of ads with Dick Gephardt attacking Dean's actual statements on things like Social Security. And it's very hard to compare that to Sanders.
That dynamic is fascinating to me. I mean, I read your piece about that with Dean, and I remember, him being a fiscal conservative and it sort of just going away because I think he was for not marriage equality, but he was the only one who had done, I think at that point, like civil marriages or civil unions, I guess it was called. And his big claim to fame on the left was that he had done sort of this grassroots fundraising and, sort of the nascent, like get money out of politics crowd or get corporate money out of politics crowd. That was what was inspiring. And of course, his like sort of full-throated arguing against the war. But that dynamic of entering the race, thinking your candidacy is going to be one thing, facts on the ground or whatever it is, that there's no room for you to do that, and you change, but your legacy positions still hang with you. That dynamic could apply to a lot of candidates in this race, I feel like.
It could, but this is just the way that we always try to interpret a race is by going back and looking at the last couple of races. It's just the way if you see a cloud looks like a face, you say, oh, the cloud looks like a face. And you don't think that is a collection of raindrops. So this race is different, but there are people who've tried to ape what works for other campaigns. Pete Buttigieg, most notably, has really tried to copy the Obama message, but in a sort of smoothed down version where Obama had kind of a 1-2 punch, which was, I represent change, I'm exciting, and also you can't trust Hillary Clinton like you can trust me. Whereas the Buttigieg message is really just, I represent change, and occasionally like a whack at the left over Medicare for all or something. It's not as potent. And frankly, there's not, the problem for Buttigieg, I think, has been there's not the same desire to punish the Democratic establishment as there was in 2008. I mean, I was looking at exit polls from 2008, 8%, like I'm trying to do the math here, but I'm a journalist. Like 1 in 12 people said their number one issue was electability, and that this year in every poll has been much, much higher. I'd be surprised the exit poll is not like 50% tonight, and it's just tougher to break through if your message is we need to change Washington, we need something fresh, and we can try something new. It's easier in a year like 2008 when it's people think the nominee will probably be president, and it's been a while since a Democrat was in office. It's harder now when people miss Barack Obama and they just want somebody who can win. So Biden, who's run a less exciting campaign here, got a later start. I mean, the crowds are smaller. There's still a sense by his rivals that there are just going to be people who show up and say, well, I'm nervous. I know who Joe Biden is. I'll vote for him. And that's not something that other candidates could have counted on.
I mean, I guess Buttigieg, though, it seems to me was also hurt by the fact that, like, when he entered the race, he thought that I think he was going to run to the left of where he ended up in. And, when he came out with like these programs on how I'm going to revamp the Supreme Court and how Medicare for all is actually a compromise position. And I think that sort of left him orphaned in some way. But let's talk about this thing with the electability, because it sounds like from on the ground there that's the argument that everybody is making going into the last week, is that I'm the most electable of all the other candidates. And I guess that must be a function of, like, if you're undecided in the last week going into the caucus, it's probably over the question of electability.
That's very accurate, I think. And I also think it's important to imagine what the conversation will be tomorrow into New Hampshire, because one thing that opponents of Sanders did not do is what Republicans did to Ron Paul, very different candidate, but Ron Paul in 2012. They basically agreed, look, Ron Paul is going to get like 20% or so of the vote, and he ended up coming in third place, really right behind Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum. He's going to get that much. There was actually one poll where he was leading, and the agreement of commentators was, okay, if he wins, Ron Paul has a small base, and he got lucky in a split field, and he can't actually win here. And so we're going to choose a candidate who is electable. I think that there will be voters in the last minute who ask themselves who's electable, and Sanders has done some work to portray himself that way, but not in a way that's convinced most voters. So that will be, I think, a factor. I can imagine people coming into the room tonight, and the last minute deciders will not go for Sanders. His strength was with having organized for a year and pulling people out. I think there are last minute deciders who might choose Warren because she actually has closed with a message that some campaigns think is silly. We'll see, which is that she is the candidate who unifies most Democrats. She doesn't anger any one part of the party. And her ads, even, she has been running ads later than other candidates, and her final ads, which you see all the time, are ordinary Iowans who voted for different people in 2016 explaining why they're voting for her. I've seen that stuff go before, and it kind of blends into the background. But in the caucus rooms, that will be the argument: is like, look, we have some candidates here. You think Joe Biden can win? Some people only like Bernie Sanders. Here's the candidate who unites everybody. The problem for her is that Buttigieg is not seen as that alienating, despite everything we know about how he's run his campaign. I think that he or Amy Klobuchar could get some of those voters too. So it really is. There could be a blowout tonight, but if it is a split where the candidates at the top get less than half the combined vote, I think that's going to be a lot of the analysis. Is like, what did we learn from this when most voters didn't want either of the top two?
Interesting. And I would imagine that there's a similar dynamic going on in New Hampshire, right? Like after Iowa, tomorrow, people in New Hampshire start to take their cues as to who can win based upon what happens in Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Well, so New Hampshire voters are ornery. I think we start using the words rock-ribbed and whatever. A lot of cliches get deployed to describe how New Hampshire voters they take their primary very seriously, and they don't like to be told, hey, this is happening, so you should turn around and vote for this now. So there is a chance. I think what would happen if Sanders is victorious is a push in New Hampshire by other candidates to say, okay, do you want him to run away with this because he's a divisive figure? And that's where the result tonight will matter. So imagine if Biden does extremely well and he can say, look, it's me or him. In New Hampshire, he has had a very flagging campaign there. That would give him a chance to reorient it. If there is a kind of cluster and Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar keep running and don't drop out of the race, and they argue that, you could have, I just said why you can't compare every race to every other race, right. But you could have a situation like 2016 where Iowa happens and Republicans say, oh, well, okay, well, Trump's got 26, 7, 30%. So good for him. We can figure out later which of us is the anti-Trump candidate, and never do it. Never do it until it's too late. There are very big differences because 75, 80% of Democratic voters really like Bernie Sanders. And in the very beginning, Trump had a hard base, but also the biggest opposition among Democrats, even though
among Republicans. Like I remember
Republicans.
I remember watching that,
was like telling themselves, and it wasn't wrong.
But yeah, I remember watching that figure of like never Trumpers went from like 80 or 78% down to like 22% by the end of the whole thing or something. It was crazy. I mean, I'm making those numbers up, but that was the trajectory.
I think we have like probably the same articles floating in our heads, these like 538 pieces that say, here's some data that proves why Trump can't ever win. And that was one of the data points.
I will say that whenever I saw those pieces, I said, they don't know what they're talking about. But that's the other thing that comes up. There was a piece by Ron Brownstein today, or maybe, I don't know when it was, over the past couple of days in the Atlantic, saying that that Biden's people are like fine with Trump, with Sanders winning in Iowa, as long as, none of the others perform too well, because they think that Sanders has a ceiling. Is that the case? Because that to me seems misguided. I mean, obviously they all have a ceiling, and maybe Sanders doesn't have the highest ceiling, although I'm seeing polling that suggests that maybe he has a higher one than people think. But
higher, but not like Trump did, and we already discussed
right.
How that things could change.
I brought this up a million times, but I got a call from a Politico reporter in 2015 doing a piece on Martin O'Malley in the spring of 2015 saying, Martin O'Malley, I'm doing this profile on O'Malley, and O'Malley has a question for progressives. How can he get them to support him instead of Elizabeth Warren? And I said, Warren's not running. They got to worry about Sanders. And the guy just laughed. He literally laughed. And I'm like, I'm serious. And he goes, you're joking. And I'm like, I'm serious. And I still get the feeling that there's like these huge swaths of people in the Democratic Party, and it could be even Biden's campaign, who just, it's impossible for them to imagine that Bernie Sanders, I mean, we hear these stories that on Wall Street, they're afraid of Warren, but they're not afraid of Sanders. And people interpret that as like, well, Warren knows how to get to finance. And that may be the case, but I also suspect that part of the reason why they're not afraid of Sanders is because like they're not capable of believing that he could win.
Yes, I think it's a combo of those things. And frankly, I don't talk to a ton of brokers or people like that, but
it seems like the Biden campaign thinks that too.
Oh yeah, but I talk to financial people, and they just can't get around their heads that Sanders would win, and they assume that if he was nominee, he would lose the general election. So they start with those assumptions, and they just don't calculate the risk. It's like none of these people read that what's that pop science book, The Black Swan? Or
right.
No one read that. Also, no one lived through 2016. And it's every election is a little bit different, but there's a reality right now where Trump has an advantage, but he is trailing in polls to Bernie Sanders, who everybody already knows is a socialist. And people point to polls and say, yes, but, only 20% of voters have a good opinion of socialism. Yeah, they have that, and half of them say they want to vote for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
There's a lot of kind of wishful thinking around him. I think there is something to the critique, and this is why Warren has done very well with a lot of DC leftists and progressives who, every time they endorse someone who's not Sanders, people they get piled on. But some of them really do. They've seen her work, and they think she is more effective and has a quicker understanding of how a president could use the levers of power than Sanders does, that right. She's actually not thought about being president forever. She just understands how the system works. But there are people who think that, but that is not really I don't think that is motivating Republicans. And part of it, I just keep this as just me consuming media and thinking this. I just think as media diverges more and more, Republicans don't know what liberals think, don't know what leftists think. They kind of, conservative media's coverage of the left is, did you see this person say something wacky about transgender people, or did you see this this leftist college professor say something insulting? There's just not much of a reckoning with how the Democrats think or the left thinks. So in 2018, that led to just Republicans assuming every Democratic primary would be a crazy person winning, and they'd run on impeachment. And no, Democrats are pretty cautious. They would, the member of the DSA convention, which I went to, and a lot of reporters went to, on the right, the only thing they covered was somebody saying that there was loud clapping and chatter in the room that triggered him, and nothing about the agenda of DSA. So they don't pay a lot of attention to what the left is doing. No, they could, but it's been a couple of years of this, and they do seem to be more interested in laughing at Hillary Clinton, which has been a very good moneymaker on the right, but not very good understanding how Democrats think, how they vote, who they vote for.
Yeah, no, I think that's the case, and you came from that beat a while back, and so you've probably seen the evolution as much as anybody, if not more. But I'm curious about if the Biden campaign really does think that if we aren't watching that dynamic of I don't need to be the one to take this guy out because somebody else will, and there's just no way he can win. And I think that that is a miscalculation. I mean, there's a little bit of awareness, and we have a clip of Chris Matthews, bless his heart, almost I think having a quasi breakdown because he seems to have over the past week or two woken up in the middle of the night and seen a vision of Bernie Sanders winning the Democratic nomination, and it seems to have terrified him. But there doesn't seem to be that awareness that it's possible. There just doesn't seem to be people are taking him seriously, his candidacy seriously, in a way that I think is preventing them from, I don't know how they would go at him, but from going at him.
I think that's part of it. I think we've been going through all the factors one by one. I think we'll assess them again after this. But they've already priced in, Sanders might win Iowa, New Hampshire, but surely we'll take him out later. And if you back up a few steps, this is extremely predictable. There were a lot of Democrats who talked themselves into thinking, well, he had a heart attack, he can't come back. He's still, after he had a heart attack, keep in mind he's running against Michael Bennet, who has had prostate cancer. He's following in the steps of John Kerry, who won the nomination after having prostate cancer. Voters are tolerant of some things. It's not good. I mean, you'd rather not. But this is a candidate who had the most donations, the most supporters, and they just said, well, okay, we're going to take out Elizabeth Warren now because there's no way Sanders can come back. So you have to wonder about the political acumen of strategists who say, this thing that clearly could happen is something we should not plan for and then panic about at the last minute. That generally is not how you win. I'm not saying they can't. And the other thing, the elephant in the room here is that Sanders supporters online and elsewhere, I'm not going to be pejorative about them, but I'm not pejorative of anybody's supporters, but they are very quick on the trigger if something looks like it's unfair, faster than other campaigns. I mean, I dealt in Iowa this week with people Sanders organizers who'd recognized me, and they'd ask if the DNC was going to get rid of the superdelegate reforms, which it's not. There's just a couple of members who were kind of ornery. They asked about if the debate rules were changed in order to hurt Sanders. Kind of not, because there's even Sanders people who think it would be great to have Mike Bloomberg on stage, and the rules don't do it. And I've just met people who thought the poll release would stop. So in all these cases, there's a hyper awareness by Sanders supporters and a lookout for ways they will try to screw him over. And you can't run into that by saying, all right, time to screw him over. And that is a good comparison with the Trump campaign in 2016, because his message was entirely, I'm the anti-establishment candidate and they hate me. So the establishment said, all right, well, here, we're going to put on our villain mask and run into Iowa and start running ads against you. It is very hard to do that against Sanders. What would need to happen is basically polling that every Democrat sees that shows Sanders losing the election and Biden winning it.
Right.
And that doesn't exist right now. So without in the absence of, no, it doesn't exist right now. Is there something they could do that would make that exist? Possibly, if there's a national conversation that really hurt Sanders. But so far, it's taken the kind of magic bullet theory approach of negativity, where there will be a story about something Sanders said or did and wrote in the past,
right,
and his supporters laugh it off because they're like, yeah, he's been here forever, he's consistent. I think there might be attacks on his policies and whether they'd be weak against Trump or polling results that show this. But I mean, credibility is hard to get back, and we've already seen polling from Third Way about how Medicare for All is not popular, and nobody noticed because we know that Third Way will release polling that agrees with Third Way's principles, sometimes from focus groups that, if you asked the question another way, would have said that Medicare for All is great.
Well, it's also hard, I think, for Democrats. I mean, I think that what you're sort of getting at is if some Joe Biden outside expenditure group, super PAC, started running ads against Sanders nationally to knock his numbers down against Trump, that would be parlayed into the most effective attack on Sanders in the primary, because he has positions that, to the extent that you're critical of them, like, Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, and they've all come out and said, Medicare for all bad. But the reason why it's bad is not because it's a good policy. It's bad because it has bad political implications. You're going to lose in a general election if you tell 150.
Yeah,
and so there's
not very inspiring.
They're not attacking him. They can't attack him in a way that resonates with Democrats, except for the most part, electability. And when you have polls out there that say he's beating Trump almost as badly as Biden is, that's a really hard sell to make.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a hard sell. And another thing, too, is that voters are buying kind of a package. The Sanders campaign is not going to say, if he's elected, we're not getting, we don't have the votes to get rid of this private insurance right away. But there's been a desensitization, and because of years of being told, if you support any kind of healthcare reform, you want to take away people's doctors, all of this. Sanders also. So I think that if Sanders comes under pressure on that, he's very comfortable arguing for it.
Right.
He's not comfortable saying how much it costs, but it's not 100% clear voters care. The problem that Warren came into is that her constituency was some leftists who were supportive of Sanders in 2016, but a lot of kind of comfortable middle-class voters who are worried that a new government program would be bad for them. And the question is, how many of them would say, I am willing to support Donald Trump for 4 years. I, a suburban voter who voted Democratic in 2018, this is enough for me. I'd rather not vote, or I'd rather vote for Donald Trump than vote for this candidate who supports Medicare for all. I think that's again, none of this is me saying that'll never happen, I'm ruling it out. What I'm saying is we're making a lot of assumptions, and
right.
Sanders' opponents especially are making a ton of assumptions that might not come true.
Let me ask you this, and let me have my own also sort of caveat here and qualifier. I think it is, we're going to find out tonight, and even after tonight, it's still extremely early in the race. But clearly, Warren had reached a peak and then dropped. The Jonathan Chait, if you're to believe his perspective on this, she dropped because of her embrace of Medicare for All. But as far as I can see, looking at the numbers and the dates, she was already in the Medicare for All camp. That I got the sense, and this was sort of backed up actually from, and it's not a perfect sample size, obviously, but I was reading through some of those Ryan Grimm emails that he got off his email list of people, why they changed. And some of, and of course you read these things and you're always looking for the thing that validates your perspective on this. So just with all those qualifiers, my sense is that it wasn't her embrace of Medicare for All that was problematic. It was her responding to the calls for her to justify the expense, and her doing that was problematic. Not so much with the leftists who wanted some type of pure version of Medicare for All and who, interpreted it as like she had Pete Buttigieg's plan. I mean, I think we hear from those people, but that's because they're more active. But rather just that there was this controversy around it, and she seemed to be defensive, in presenting that plan, which I should note, Bernie Sanders does not have a financing plan. He has a couple of suggestions as to where the money's going to come from, but he hasn't done anything close to what she did. But by doing that, she was responding to her critics in a way that made it seem like she was less confident about her candidacy than maybe she should be.
I think that's fair. And so the irony of this is that her plan, so there's disputes about whether her payment plan and her decision to say the middle class taxes will not go up for this is the problem. I think there's something there because what Donald Trump does is say we're going to do everything for free and someone else is going to pay for it, and his voters don't care. I think Democratic voters tend to care more if they're told something can be done and there's going to be no cost to it. And so Sanders, just by saying, yes, we're going to raise your tax at some point, I think that might have been Warren's mistake, is not saying even something like, okay, we're paying for 80% of this with higher taxes on the rich, but you're going to pay this much more you're going to take this much more out of your paycheck, and you'll never have to take anything out of your paycheck ever again to pay for health care. That might have been more convincing to people, but I think the rest of the analysis is right. And it's a really interesting distinction because it seemed less like Warren. So Warren is serious about this. Warren's campaign always wanted to have, it was one of the markers they wanted for the campaign was, we will also be the campaign that explains how everything is going to get paid for. So they wanted to do that, but they decided to make it pass the test that no voter will worry that their taxes will go up. And that was kind of old school Democratic thinking. One thing you hear from veterans of the Obama campaign is that he ran all middle class tax cuts, and in the final polls, as he was voting, voters thought he was just about as good at lowering taxes as John McCain was. That thinking is different now because the Trump cut taxes. They were extremely unpopular tax cuts that cost Republican votes, and it's popular to say I'm going to get rid of them. But this is a whole thing. I mean, it was strange to watch because Warren still gets a lot of enthusiasm. She gets big crowds. She's in a position, I think, where she'd get a chance to come back. But the surprise, I think two things happened to her campaign. One, she could have done that and gone back to more moderate suburban voters, but Pete Buttigieg existed. And she could have done that and gotten a cushion from female voters who don't like the idea of voting in Iowa and then they're having an all-male primary. But Amy Klobuchar exists, and she's got some of those people. So Warren's in this strange position where, the difference of 2 or 3 points tonight would make it look like either she has come back and she is going to be one of the finishers in New Hampshire on Super Tuesday, or it could make it look like she made terrible mistakes and is never going to come back. And I don't know. We have to wait a couple hours to find out.
What are the different metrics? Because I know that you need to get 15% of the delegates or the votes to get delegates, right? I've been told by that there's a threshold, but I've also heard that out of Iowa, there's like 4 different metrics that they're going to use. Can you explain that to us if it's possible that it's explainable?
Yeah. It's not that hard. So, first thing to know is that we're going to know everything at once. There's not going to be – so people go into a room, they say, hey, get into the corner of the person you support, and voters will go into their corners, and there'll be a count, and people who did not get 15% will be asked, okay, who else, do you want to go to another candidate, or do you want to leave? That always happens. There's a couple of subtle changes this year, but that always happens. What is new this year is that the party will announce at the end of when polls are coming out. When results are coming, they will say, here was the vote when people first got in the room. Here was the vote when they finally sorted things out and got their final preferences. So what those final preferences are doing is saying who got the
second choice votes.
They're going to very closely mirror who got delegates in the room. The thing that gets really confusing is that the word delegates has to get used a lot. In that room, people are going to choose delegates to the state, the convention in their congressional districts. So basically, they're choosing. All right, we got 15 votes for Warren, we got 15 votes for Sanders. That's it. We elected one delegate for Warren, one delegate for Sanders, and they're going to go to the next round. That is how the party selects delegates to the national convention. So when people say 4 numbers, I think they could say 3, but the reason there are 4 is because you're going to get 1, the raw vote of when people walked in the room, which is going to include people who stayed strong and voted for John Delaney. 2, the vote at the end of the night. 3, how that end of the night vote translated to these caucus by caucus delegates. And then the 4th thing you'll get is what that means in terms of delegates to the national convention.
Okay.
Those are the 4. So the least important number, funny enough, is probably the delegates to the national convention. That will move. I think the CBS study of this from their poll is pretty good, which is that can move in pretty subtle ways. If there's a Sanders victory, it means probably 2 more delegates for him. If there's a Biden victory, it means 2 more delegates for him. In a race, we're about, California's going to vote pretty soon, and they have hundreds of delegates.
Right.
So that's the least important number, but that is the 4th thing.
Okay, so let me just go back over that. That's interesting. So, if we think of Iowa as a mechanism in which shows momentum and influences, particularly in this context, right? Like electability, it seems to me, and you've made this point, is probably at a premium. And I think that's because, we're talking about, there's an incumbent president who's a Republican who everybody wants to get out of office. So the first one is the raw vote. That's what everybody who is running will have some representation there. The second one is the actual sort of like traditional result, which is after you've caucused, who emerges. So the difference between the end of the night and the raw vote will tell us like who people migrated to, right? On some level. We don't know specifically, but we'll see like, oh, John Delaney had 10% when people entered in. And then, that bump was spread amongst, these 3 other candidates, let's say. Then you have the mini delegates, as I'm calling them, which will go and elect the state delegates. But because Iowa has so few state delegates, that is the least relevant because they will take place at the convention. They'll be counted at the convention. They're just not that overwhelming in terms of a force. Well, this has been
not really. It's just that the party didn't used to count that. Now it's counting that, and so there are 4, but basically that the second preference number is going to be the most. That's probably going to match up with the delegates in the room and statewide.
Okay, and so number 1 will be we will hear a lot about that raw vote if it in any way diverges significantly from the second one because somebody will find utility in it.
And this is not inside information, but imagine Sanders got 26% in that first round, and then when people resorted, Joe Biden got 27% and Sanders stayed at 26%. I think the Sanders campaign would say, they would put out a press release saying that we're proud that we won we won the first count, and we're going on to as victors to New Hampshire. And the Biden campaign would say we won. I don't think it's as bad as having 2 popes at the same time or something like that. But that is what the conflict would be. One crowd will say and they'll have something to stand on because they will be able to say, look, this is a divided race, but when people have a second chance, to look at the candidates when they have another think about it, they don't go to them, they go to me.
Right.
I think there are a lot. There'll be a candidate who says that, and it could be at this moment in time, before we know anything, it could be a Pete Buttigieg comes in lower, and everybody has him as the second choice. He would rush into New Hampshire and say, "I am the consensus candidate. I'm the one that." Despite, I'm sure he'd have an eloquent way of saying this I can't do right now, but after a year of people trying to make this choice, I'm the one that everyone's comfortable with.
Well, and that's the thing, it seems to me, is that if you're any of these other candidates besides Sanders, right? Let's presume that he's going to win because that's what the polling is telling us. The whole game is to undercut that narrative that he had a decisive win in Iowa because you don't want it to influence New Hampshire. And the way you do that is by just muddying the waters. And this is where, suddenly, frankly, Twitter becomes a very important arena because, everybody who's writing their takes off of this, you get a lot of people who are motivated and then a lot of people who are going to be influenced by it. It's going to be fascinating. Where are you going to be tonight? Are you going to be just sitting in that Marriott? Are you just hang in that Marriott for the rest of the day until you get on the plane and go to New Hampshire?
I have to help with some kinds of coverage. I don't think I will cover a caucus in person. I've done it before. It's super interesting. It's definitely a thing you should do once. But we're in a situation where there's minute by minute. How should I be spending my time? And if I'm spending an hour with bad Wi-Fi, not helping figure out what's going on in the race, it's probably not good. So I think I'm going to help analyze the races. I have a newsletter coming out pretty shortly, then another one coming out in the morning that'll analyze the races. But then I'm going to go to probably the Sanders and Warren events. Even the Buttigieg and Biden events are actually on the same campus at Drake University. They're the ones I think you'll see people walking back and forth between. I think I'll see that, and then I'm going to head to New Hampshire on one of the campaign planes. I don't know, 10 hours. Wait, what's the time? 11 hours or so, 12 hours.
Wow.
Depending how long this takes.
Nuts. All right, man. Well, good luck, and we'll be in touch. Would love to hear from you again. All right. Dave Weigel, always a pleasure. Thanks for giving us so much time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Dave Weigel, ladies and gentlemen. Get on that trailer. Learn something. Fascinating. I mean, it really is going to come down to that. Divergence in metrics that are going to come out is going to be big because we're going to hear people, I mean, if I'm one of those other campaigns, if I'm Biden or Buttigieg or Warren or Klobuchar for that matter, I am getting ready to shoot that second number out, or I should say that first raw vote out of a cannon. Right? Because if you go in there and you get 12% of the vote or whatever, there's a lot of noise to signal ratio opportunities with that. Well, here we are, folks. Going to be a nutso 11 months or 10 months from here on in, as if the last 10 months have been,
This is the fun part.
Yeah, at least now the waiting is over. And it's going to come rapid fire. Just to remind, we'll go over this tonight. See you in the fun half. Oh, wait. I should just say, don't forget, you can support this program by becoming a member. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Your support makes this show possible. Also, the AM Quickie, the numbers have been going up. Our graph is like this right now. People are enjoying the show. 8 a.m. We get it out, and we're perfecting the voice of it. And check it out, amquickie.com. It's available on our app, of course. TMBS. When is the show?
Wednesday TMBS this week.
Wednesday TMBS. So you can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS. And the Antifada. Check that out, patreon.com/the Antifada. And, of course, Literary Hangover.
I released about an hour and a half of me reading Hudibrastic couplets from Ebenezer Cook's poetry from the early 1700s. So
I didn't understand any of that.
That's
I didn't understand. Like,
I'm sure everybody else did.
Get on it, folks.
Hudibras was we won't get into that. But anyway, check it out on the public feed. And Alex and I will have a new episode this weekend talking about Bacon's Rebellion. And that's one of the subjects of the poem.
You didn't put the poem behind the paywall?
Initially, they were behind the paywall, but now they're
released,
available
ladies and
for
gentlemen.
everybody.
They're free now. There you go. I can't wait for like all this stuff just blows away. And then just like 50 years from now, my kids are passing on your audio books on or poetry readings.
I'm bringing Ebenezer Cook's 300-year-old words back to life.
That's huge.
I mean, I like it.
See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
All right, folks, we're going to take some calls. We're going to take a bunch of calls tonight, too. And, you know, it's craziness. So it's just craziness. I referenced earlier that I read a piece that said that Joe Biden's people are more than happy to allow Bernie to win tonight. They don't think they're going to do well in Iowa. The key for them is to keep the other candidates from winning big, because they think basically there's this attitude still that exists that they think Bernie cannot win. And from someone from, who has the perspective of wanting Bernie to win, I think that's probably a good place to be. Here is Chris Matthews, who does seem to think that Bernie can win and seems to be very, very upset at that prospect. And it feels a little bit like he has internalized it in such a way that it's actually becoming a little depressing for him. And, there is a dynamic that exists that was even more obviously present in the aughts, which was that the generation that was in control of our politics had been educated essentially in politics during McGovern's era. And that is the lesson that they learned, and that is the lens in which they see everything. And it's understandable. I mean, they say like the ages, I don't know, like 2 to 5 are the most important for child development and affect your brain. And like things that happen, like, when you're 9 or something, depending on what it is, can implicate your life for the rest of your life. And, as I get older, I realize like I'm still working on premises that happened, before I was 14. And I think that's what they have. And as we get further out and that generation loses grip on the body politic, they can't really fully understand or envision something different happening. Here is Chris Matthews expressing this, I guess, almost like existential dread.
What are my thoughts? I'm not happy. I'm not happy with this field. I think they got to find a candidate for president that can beat Trump.
And you don't think anybody in this field
I'm looking. I'm still looking.
Still looking.
What's the problem?
Obvious problems. They're all problems. Bernie Sanders is not going to be president of the United States. Okay? I went back to the 72 race. I was a young volunteer for the DNC. I was working for a senator from Utah at the time. I've got to tell you, it feels a lot like it. A lot of giddiness, a lot of excitement, a thrill about this guy.
You're saying a lot like McGovern?
Well, exactly, because he was very excited the party.
Pause it. I will also tell you that there was so much giddiness and excitement over Barack Obama that Chris Matthews literally said, I have a tingle running down my leg. Literally said that. I mean, so yes, people were very excited for McGovern. And yes, people were very excited for Dean. And yes, people were very excited for Obama. So the lesson that we can learn there is be the candidate that wins, not the one that loses.
Exactly, because he was very excited. He excited the party completely, blew away a really good candidate like Muskie, a really good guy, blew him right out of the water because he had some issues. Now, analytically, I think a couple things have happened. One is Warren was riding high. I thought she was going to sweep through everything. I should first 2 easily and just keep going. She was the one candidate I thought could do that. What happened? She got a lot of scrutiny. You don't want a lot of scrutiny, and she got a lot of it. Does this stuff add up? The Medicare for all, the free college, all that stuff got killed. And guess who's going to get it now? Bernie's going to get it now. Bernie's going to ride high, and he's finally going to get scrutiny about his whole life, his ideology, his whole life, who did he root for all his life. Who is this guy ideologically? It's not just the nice, good stuff like health care. Why does he say the stuff he does about Maduro and people like that? Why does he say Denmark one week and then somebody else? I mean, people got to figure out who the guy is. Yeah. I think I know because I've dealt with these guys most of my adult life. They're usually the guys at the card tables at an anti-war rally. There'll be there some old guy with some old literature from this socialist party to that, trying to sell it, trying to latch on to the anti-war movement. There's always guys like that. And they're usually, as Howard Fine once said, non-negotiable demands, yelling up at the administration building during the anti-war movement. I know them, but I think the country's going to get to know them. I think we got a problem. We'll see. But, nobody's going to say it tonight. They're all going to be cheering. Good old Bernie. I think he's going to win big tonight, real big.
I mean, this is fascinating stuff. What he is talking about is he, from a very young age, was on the inside, had access, worked on the Hill, and always had a certain amount of disdain for a certain type of leftist who he thought was just a loon and believed loony things. And it is he is incapable of seeing that A, his perspective was a function of his relative proximity to power, and B, an understanding of where the country is. McGovern won, or was popular, or was generating this interest because of the war, of a very specific feeling of the war being problematic. This is not the same. The issues are not the same here. If anything, it's closer to 2004. But Dean did not get out of Iowa. But the dynamic was pushing back an incumbent president who is just broadly not good. And Dean had problems because he started the race thinking he was going to be a conservative. And by the time he got to Iowa, he was the darling of the left, to the extent that there was one at that time. And the left at that time was just more like a little bit more outsider-insider dynamic. We don't want corporations to own these things. And it was, again, the war. Problem is, when they caught Saddam Hussein 2 months or whenever it was before, or 3 months out before the Iowa caucus, people started getting worried about George Bush winning. And I think that pushed them away. And that's why he ended up with a guy who was a war hero. We need to have some type of military bona fides. And then, of course, we ran into the same problem that we ran in with Clinton and we would run in with Biden, which is when you are running on the sort of personal attributes that you have, when you make the election about you as a candidate, you are much more vulnerable to being taken out. If Barack Obama had run as the Messiah, as opposed to what they were trying to project on him, he would have had a problem. But he was running on change. He was running on a concept that was outside of him. He tied into that narrative, but it was outside of him. So I gotta say, I think Matthews is right to be despondent based upon his preferences, because I think that Bernie's going to come out of this, and it is very hard to come up with a scenario right now that involves another candidate before you get to the convention winning this thing outright. And then it becomes as to, which of these other candidates are going to throw in with whom? Which of them see a future for themselves in a party? Because if Bernie is in the lead, here's the thing. If Bernie is in the lead after Super Tuesday by a significant amount, and you want a future in the party, it's one thing if you're a sitting senator, but I hope Pete Buttigieg is giving himself enough room to tack back. Because if you want a future in this party and you see Bernie Sanders out in the lead, you have to know that it's not just about Bernie Sanders. You're looking at AOC. If you have any questions as to whether AOC is the future of the party, that's going to be resolved if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination and wins the general election. It's an open and shut case, right? But gets a little more complicated if Sanders wins the primary and then loses in the general. But still, AOC that sets AOC's timeline back maybe 5 or 10 years. But so what? Her biggest problem is that the Constitution doesn't allow you to run for president till you're 35. Is that what it is? I'm saying that facetiously, sort of. So Donald Trump gave an interview last night with Sean Hannity. I just want you to contemplate this. Everyone anticipated the Senate that the timeline was to exonerate Donald Trump before this interview with Sean Hannity for the Super Bowl and before the State of the Union. I am convinced that that vote to not have witnesses was painful enough for the Republicans, particularly those Republican senators who are vulnerable, that they were afraid of exonerating Trump before Wednesday because they didn't want this interview to be all about how I'm innocent. All these guys, they voted for me. I'm innocent in the Senate. That was what his State of the Union address would be. And they didn't want that. They want this to be as quiet as possible. People forget that the grab him by the vagina line, he didn't say vagina. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm trying to be somewhat appropriate. That got overshadowed by the Comey letter. People don't realize that it just like when they measure like the distance these things travel, it didn't travel as much as we all anticipated it did. And I think that they want to keep the impeachment story subjugated in some way. And these are the last two opportunities that Donald Trump has to have a national, unadulterated national audience. The Super Bowl and the State of the Union. And I also think that they probably speculate the voter that would be most swayed by that witness vote on those senators is watching the Super Bowl and watching the State of the Union. They're informed. They care about process. They like football. Here's Sean Hannity with Donald Trump. And Trump is, instead of having to brag about how he's not guilty, no collusion, not guilty, didn't perfect phone call, instead he's going down his list of folks.
Bloomberg. Very little. I just think of little. You know, now he wants a box for the debates to stand on. Okay, it's okay. There's nothing wrong. You could be short. Why should he get a box to stand on, okay? He wants a box for the debates. Why should he be entitled to that? Really? Then does that mean everyone else gets a box?
I guess if they want one, I will have to negotiate
well, the other thing
boxes.
Is very interesting. Cory Booker and all these people couldn't get any of the things that Bloomberg's getting now. I think it's very unfair for the Democrats, but I would love to run against Bloomberg. I would love it.
He would love to run against.
Okay, now, here's the thing about this debate thing. Well, first off, I like the, he's little. I'm going to go after him because he's little. Short Mike. Mini Mike with the debate. Now, what he's doing is sort of fascinating in a way because he has now made it. He has now made it a sort of like radioactive for Bloomberg to have a stool because it will come out. He is now. I mean, it's smart. It's smart. He has now made it radioactive for him to do that. And if Bloomberg makes it to the general election and is going against Trump, you know, the first thing Trump is going to do when he gets on the debate stage, like, how come he gets a stand? I want a stand.
I want one of those.
I'll take a stand too. You can see me tower over this thing. And you know that if Bloomberg gets into the debate, because it's unclear that he's definitely going to get into the debate with the Democrats, but they've opened the door. If he does, you know that is going to be a story about him having the stand.
Be the main thing I'm interested in finding out about that debate.
Yes.
I'm envisioning a general debate where, like with Hillary Clinton, where they're walking around the stage, just Trump towering over Mike Bloomberg, just like tiny little Mike.
And the interesting about this goes back to my theory that, again, you know, what is Bloomberg selling? He's not selling a list of policy proposals, although I guess you could say climate change he's been pushing a little bit. But he is selling like, I can beat Donald Trump. I'm a real billionaire. In other words, I have more status than he does. I'm a real man as opposed to him, et cetera, et cetera. And saying that little Mike needs you know, a little help to get up to the counter.
That's okay if you need a stool.
It's okay.
It's okay.
He's saying it's okay to be so short. It's okay.
It's okay to
look
be
at. I'm
a student.
gracious. Look at. It's okay for you to be short. I mean, it is. What is Bloomberg trying to do here? He's trying to embarrass Donald Trump, right? That's why they trotted him out at the DNC, to embarrass him. And the problem is you cannot get into that type of fight with Trump and win because he has no shame, A, and his supporters have no shame. So like the stuff that Trump can say will not cost him. Nobody else can go up and say those things because it will cost them because of the nature of his supporters. That is the flaw in Michael Bloomberg's candidacy. Okay, so there's this other question about Mike Bloomberg. The DNC has lowered the donor threshold. There were two things. You needed to hit a certain amount in the polls and you need to have a certain amount of small donors. They have lowered that donor threshold, which will pave the way for Bloomberg could be qualified to make it into the debates. And this is a really fascinating, I think, turn of events. Because one, people are rightfully taking the opportunity to say, look at the DNC changing their rules. There really is no... It really is problematic that they would change the rules midstream. Okay, just generically speaking, because they claim so vociferously that they didn't, and now they're coming out and saying that, well, after the votes are taken, the idea that we would change the rules. One, if that was the case, this is something they should have outlined, in advance. There should be a document that was released when they come up with a debate schedule. We reserve the right to include more candidates after, because it's not just a question of changing the rules and making it more stringent for people to get in, which I think is legitimate, right? Like people, but the idea is that you're opening it up to people after people have dropped out. That doesn't make any sense. You could have written the rules as such that, like, okay, if anybody, now that we're into actual voting and we don't have to predict who has interest, if you reach more than 4% when you're voting, if they had written this before, if you got more than 4% of the popular vote in, or I should say the vote in a primary, then you're eligible for the next debate or something like that. I don't know what the number is, but they didn't do that. And so people are rightfully complaining. And I think it's very helpful that they're complaining because I know that supposedly the line is people overreacted to some members of the DNC just floating the idea of changing things in such a way that superdelegates get more power. I don't know that the DNC would do that, but there is no reason to believe that they should be trusted not to. So any overreaction to even the smallest change, even if it benefits your preferred candidate, should take place as a way of the DNC to be aware and feel like we are under intense scrutiny. And if we actually do make a material change, we could get in trouble for it. That, I think, is very helpful and important. With all that said, including Mike Bloomberg in the debates, I think is very helpful for every other candidate. Because right now, all that Bloomberg is doing is spending hundreds of millions of dollars defining himself to people, and he is moving up in the polls. And that is just a fact, Jack. Okay? Jack. And I'm the guy who's going to tell you that you should both complain that the DNC is changing the rules and hope that they allow Mike Bloomberg into the debates so that he's forced into the debates. So that he can be reminded that this is the crap he was saying 15 years ago in New York City as he was arresting hundreds, if not thousands of people on the street for just protesting.
No place epitomizes the American experience and the American spirit more than New York City. Ironically, it is exactly because we are a city that embraces freedom, that welcomes everyone and encourages their dreams, that New York remains on the front lines in the war on terror. I want to thank President Bush for supporting New York City in changing the Homeland Security funding formula for leading the global war on terrorism. The president deserves our support. We are here to support him.
Yeah, he was a Republican and then he was an independent, and there's a lot of stuff that Michael Bloomberg has to reckon with, and I want to see him on a debate stage and watch these Democrats tear into this guy. Now, some of them are going to back up because they're going to want his money. But the fact is he should be on a debate and he should have to justify himself. It's only going to hurt him. It's not like he's not getting any other attention. It's only going to hurt him because he's going to get brought into the conversation and he can't just hide out forever. So I would encourage you both to complain that he's getting in and they're changing the rules. The DNC is changing the rules, and to be happy he's in. That's how Susan Collins gets to vote for witnesses. Free vote. She gets to pretend like she's for witnesses. She doesn't pay the political price because there's not going to be witnesses. That's what you're going to do, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to complain the DNC is changing the rules, and you're going to enjoy it because you want Mike Bloomberg on that stage.
Does he want to be on this stage?
No. No, he does not. And that's the point. Why would he? I'll debate Donald Trump. Or I'll debate when I'm the last guy standing, because the way that people drop out of races is not because they don't getting delegates. So they don't have the money. He's going to be in this race. He's going to be the last guy standing. He's still going to be running for president in November of 2020, regardless of what he gets the nomination. So there's that little dichotomy. What's the other clip we have of Trump with Hannity?
Oh, you know, him kind of doing his normal, I'm the most impressive president in the history of America, and then sort of a compilation.
We'll play that tonight.
Yeah.
Let's, here is Chris Christie. Now look, I'm about to present to you a little piece that we call the first 75 seconds that Chris Christie has told the truth. And he can only tell the truth for 75 seconds. He was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I don't know, what is Chris Christie doing these days? Is he just sitting on some boards? Chilling. It's over for him, fortunately, I hope. But here he is. He's coming out, taking his opportunity to take a swipe at Michael Bloomberg. And I got to say, there's some truth here, ladies and gentlemen.
Tweets from the president all going after Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, listen, I disagree on that one with the president. I don't think there is any chance that Mike Bloomberg is the Democratic nominee.
I agree.
Because let me tell you something, Bernie Sanders is a lot of things. He's not stupid. And if it comes down to Sanders emerging from these first three, let me tell you what you're going to see on TV from Sanders. You're going to see Mike Bloomberg endorsing Rudy Giuliani. You're going to see him endorsing George W. Bush. You're going to see him endorsing John McCain. And not lukewarm, enthusiastic. If you're telling me that the energized part of the Democratic Party is going to go, oh, hell, we can trust Mike Bloomberg. We can trust Mike Bloomberg. No one trusts Mike Bloomberg, okay? Because Mike Bloomberg's for Mike Bloomberg. He was a Republican when it was convenient and was cuddled up to Rudy Giuliani. Then when it was not so great to be a Republican during the Iraq War, he becomes an independent. And then when he's not an independent anymore, because that doesn't work, he becomes a Democrat. So listen,
all those problems
the only people winning here.
And I agree with
The only winners here are Bloomberg's consultants. They're the only winners here. Get them to buy you dinner every day.
You just seem upset that you're not one.
Wait. We got to let it go. Let it go. We got to hear when he stops telling the truth.
The only winners here are Bloomberg's consultants. They're the only winners here. Get them to buy you dinner every day.
You just seem upset that you're not one of them.
Yeah. Believe me, I don't consult for people without principles.
Here's the one thing.
All right, there we go. We had to go to that point. The idea he was on a roll, truth telling. Michael Bloomberg's only for himself. That Bernie Sanders is going to put up videos of him embracing Giuliani and Bush and McCain. It's just that when he got to the point of like, I only consult people with principles. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not so old that my memory has failed me as to how much. Do we remember 2 years ago we were saying that Chris Christie was the guy who could go out and get the hamburgers for Trump at McDonald's when he needed to? Like literally. I only consult with people with principles. I mean, I like the fact that Rahm Emanuel, basically said, you're just saying that because you want to get a consultant fee from him. But I'm sure that Chris Christie already applied for that job and got rejected. But there it is. He was able to tell the truth for 75 seconds. Let's go to the phones. Got a lot of people holding. We're going to have people we're going to be in touch with tonight. So hang in there. I don't know if people had to drop off the phone here. Calling from a 713 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, this is William. I'm actually calling from Canada, 713. That's a Houston area code, but I'm in the process of trying to move to Canada with my wife.
All right, fair enough.
Canadian citizen. I was calling. I've actually been meaning to ask this question for a while now, but it's kind of a loaded question. Go where you want with it, but basically, I'm wondering, like on the left, sometimes it seems like there is a hesitance to defend socialism where it actually exists. And like, it's actually relevant, you just talking about Michael Bloomberg. And a few weeks ago, there was some joking going around with the whole, like his defense of China thing. And I thought it was a little bit simplistic.
All right, well, wait. We got to move. We got to move. What's the question?
Yeah. Do you think that when you call China a dictatorship and don't actually discuss the nuances of their form of government, that it actually weakens the argument for socialism across the board? Because it's like you have to, if you're going to use China as an argument, which it is a really good argument to show socialism, having more than any other country in the history of the world, China has reduced global poverty. So if you're going to use that argument for how socialism can be used to eliminate poverty, look,
I would say, listen, the China's economy is mixed in a myriad of ways. As a political system, they are authoritarian. Right. I mean, that's just,
right.
And from an economic system, they are, socialistic in maybe more so than I don't know, maybe all of the countries.
They are authoritarian, but they do have democracy, though. And I think that's, I
just think that
ignored.
I think that there's value in being nuanced with China, as an electoral strategy or teaching the American public in terms of socialism? Probably not. I mean, I don't know that you should necessarily be out there China bashing without a specific purpose. But I just think that if you're asking me from just a sheer communication standpoint, to mass audiences, I just think that you're better off if you want to look for examples of the type of socialism that we're going to, that is on the ballot, at least, now and probably for a couple of decades, you're better off just looking at places like, I don't know, Sweden or
that's
Northern
the
Europe
thing too, though. Even with Norway and Sweden, people will try to pretend like those countries aren't socialist either. You talk mixed economy, but Norway's socialism is actually a lot more similar to Venezuela's socialism than a lot of people give it credit for.
Well, yeah, they have more of their industry is controlled by their government. Yes. I mean, I understand that. I agree. I'm just saying that if you're asking me if people should have a more nuanced conversation about China for the sake of teaching people socialism, I would say, and I assume you're talking about the broad masses, I would say that's, the return on investment is going to be low if you're, I think I would have people on this show, to interview about that dynamic. That would be a good show topic for me. But if I was running a political campaign, that's not what I would do.
Yeah, the only messaging I would
appreciate
have
the call
on that is like, why do Michael Bloomberg and Scott Walker like the Foxconn model, right? But that's not getting into his let's teach them about China's model first. That's not really, unless that's your entire thing. And you're doing an educational project.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would do it here, but I mean, if you're going out as a political campaign and you want to type use the nuances of China as a way of teaching people about socialism, for mass consumption, I would say easier ways of doing that.
Yeah, I don't think politics is downstream from an understanding of Chinese history.
And I would add, I think there's some real problems that we have that Matt Stoller writes quite well about our supply chain being, in many ways, aspects of it being basically in China's hands. I mean, I think that's a problem. We had a flu vaccine shortage a couple of years ago. There's a lot of damage that China could do to us if they wanted to do, which I think, at one point they very well may. Or at the very least, you see stuff where they quarantine 20 million people. I mean, what if it was a situation where I don't know, whatever it is that we depend upon them for, if it's vaccinations, companies that are doing business in vaccinations, or I don't know, whatever it is. If they were faced with some type of catastrophe where they needed to save 30 million or 50 million or 100 million of their population, or didn't want to, or whatever it is, and it was a choice of them allowing goods to be shipped to us or them keeping it, they can be really sweet guys, but I mean, people are going to protect their own people. Calling from a 541 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Desi from the sunny Oregon coast.
Desi from the sunny Oregon coast. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
I'm calling to let you know of a possibly bombshell investigative journalism event that's coming up. Have you guys heard of the Make Women Great Again conference?
Oh,
$2,000.
Oh, I did. 2022 or something like that, isn't it? What is that?
Convention, 22convention.com, and it promises to be the mansplaining event of the decade.
Yes, I was really.
Yeah.
What are we just one day away? I was really thinking about that. It really occurred to me. Oh, wait. Oh, this is just a save early. It's in May. Maybe.
It's all the way in May, so I just missed early tickets. It was going to be $1,000. I can't afford them, but I thought it would be cool to attend and
$1,000.
Wait, I'm sorry. Excuse me. How much? That's the early bird ticket cost?
The early bird tickets are I think sold. It said I had 3 hours left yesterday, so it's $2,000 now, I believe.
No, it saves 50% on early bird.
They might have extended the deadline.
Yeah.
So, and or you could just protest in a white bonnet and red cape and have a candlelit vigil outside of it if you can't afford to go, I guess.
I feel like maybe we could, maybe I should do that. You can bring a friend for free. I mean, I feel like it could be worth it. But I also have a feeling if there's anybody who's smart in journalism, they're sending 100 million people there for clicks. But that's crazy. I appreciate that. We're going to have to look into this more. Desi.
Absolutely. It's really important because they're going to mansplain about how the pay gap's not our fault because it's all about the choices we made. And it's I have my degree, so I don't need to be mansplained for that much money about why things aren't fair, but okay.
Well, Desi,
so
I think you're probably proving the point. That's one of the things that women just aren't motivated enough to go and do these things and not willing to make the investment. So, that's probably.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I didn't want to waste your time. I'm sure that there's a lot of majority reporters who could do a bunch about it, and I don't have a lot to say besides it's here and it's upsetting me. So.
Well, Desi, I promise you, we're going to do our best to make a lot of fun of it.
Okay. Cool.
All
Super.
right.
All right.
Appreciate
I'll
the
be
call.
listening.
Bye. We have let's.
And then they're having a mansplaining conference that hopes to make women great again. Ladies, y'all are already great. But they're going to do a 3-day seminar for women led by all men.
They should start off with men.
Florida.
Can they start off with a bunch of men sitting up there manspreading?
Yeah.
Letting the boys hang out?
I think my new character, Toxic Shock, needs to make an appearance. Have y'all seen the picture of Toxic Shock in his uniform, in his outfit, in his superhero outfit? It's damn fine sexy. Social justice warrior by day, he invades the left. Little do they know that beneath the surface lurks the superhero, Toxic Shock.
Who's this guy?
There it is, folks.
He's some new.
I don't get where he's
Chad
coming from.
Pant, very strange. Pather or something.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. Mike from Pennsylvania. How are you?
Mike from Pennsylvania. Long time no talk to. How are you?
I'm good. I wanted to talk a bit about the Iowa caucus from like a organizer point of view, if I could.
Please.
So I know you've touched on this in your show, but the amount of voter contacts and data that the Bernie Sanders campaign has done is mind-boggling and blows every other campaign for president ever out of the water. They did over 10 million calls to Iowa. They knocked over 500,000 doors in a state with a couple million people. They have more people identified as caucus goers now than they did in 2016 when they got 48%. And I'm not saying they're going to get 48%, but I'm just trying to give people an understanding that if there's anything they could have done with Field, it has been done. There is no more grassroots energy. In fact, I think you covered this too. They shut down doing field organizing into Iowa because they felt like it was counterproductive at this point because they've knocked people's doors so many times.
Diminished returns.
And you'll start to actually offend people. You know, if you've knocked on their door 8 times and talked to them 4 times, they're like, okay, I talked to you already.
Right.
Come on.
All right. Well, so how do we interpret if Bernie... I mean, it's hard not having the polls on some level because, and we have to go back and look at maybe polls that were earlier polls. But, the theory of the case, or at least my theory of the case, was that Sanders should, if what his theory is of that campaign is correct, they should be bringing in, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 9 points, or maybe more, I guess, more than any poll predicted because they're reaching people who are such low propensity voters that they would not be captured in the polls. So assuming that Sanders, wins, assuming that he maybe beats his polling, that would be indicative of the value of that ground game. What if he doesn't? I mean, what if he underperforms? What does that tell us, seeing as how that they could not have been better at the ground game?
So, yeah, first of all, I would say there is one anecdote already from today. Now, this is not definitive, but this is just an idea. The first satellite caucus location has ended in Iowa, and it was carried by Bernie Sanders, and it was because 10 Somali citizens who worked at the local meat packing plant came and caucused for Bernie. So he carried that first satellite location. Now, to answer your question, I've done more than just field. I've run, political campaigns, and I can tell you, standard belief is that the most that you can do is push the numbers by about 5 to 7 points with the field program. So, but ultimately, you need to have a core of support, a message that's resonating, and some sort of stuff that penetrates the culture deeper than just knocking doors and making phone calls. And so I think Bernie Sanders has that, and anything is possible. I mean, if they underperform the polls, that to me would indicate that there was some sort of significant swing against Bernie in the sentiment of the voters just prior to the caucus. Now, I have no idea what that could possibly be, and I don't see any evidence for it, but that would be what I would say.
I mean, my guess would be if that happens, it is that people just get cold feet at the last minute and think that he can't win.
And I just don't see.
We're completely speculating about numbers that we don't know about. I'm just describing a hypothetical of a hypothetical, right? I'm just trying to give people a sense of I just want the analysis to be consistent. And so that, going in and setting sort of some benchmarks now so that, in the event of a Sanders win, I'm not sort of saying something that I wasn't saying beforehand. In the event of a Sanders loss, I'm not saying something that I wasn't saying before and then. I think that's all I'm doing.
There's one element. Now, I've never worked at Caucus, so this is a place where I'm going out of my expertise, but I do have friends from Philadelphia DSA and the Lehigh Valley DSA who've gone to Iowa. And there's even, I have a show on twitch.tv called Central_Committee.
Yeah.
And we have a friend touring news who actually moved to Iowa to volunteer and then was since hired onto the Bernie campaign as an organizer. And what they're telling me, my friends from the DSA and my friend touring news, is that there's none of that sentiment. If anything, it is a lot of people who were interested in caucusing but didn't have the skills and then have since been given the confidence. Like for people like you and me, Sam, who've been voting since they're 18, it's not, it's just a habit. We're confident. We know how it works. But if you're a first-time voter and you've never experienced it and you don't really know what you're supposed to do and you don't want to get in trouble, having somebody there to kind of hold your hand and say, this is how you do it, I'll watch your back, there's nothing to be concerned about, actually gets a lot more people out there.
I bet.
Especially if you're from a marginalized community, having somebody there who seems to know what they're doing and is going to make sure you don't do anything wrong or humiliate yourself is important. Those kind of social dynamics people don't really understand or take account of. We're very much a number-focused industry. They like looking at numbers on a page that says percentage this, but the human connection is something that the Sanders campaign has on a whole nother level. And so, as far as the downsides, the one unpredictable thing, sorry for that preamble, was just, I don't know. I think a lot of candidates are going to be around that 15% viability threshold. And exactly who is not viable and where could shift the numbers quite a bit.
Yep.
And we know that because 50% of Warren voters say that their second choice is Bernie. So every time she's non-viable in a caucus location, we're talking about 8-9 point bump to Bernie, 7-8-9 point bump to Bernie in that caucus location. But if she hangs on and gets 16%, he's going to underperform a little bit. And if say Buttigieg is non-viable in a lot of places, his voters like Bernie the least of any of the candidates. So they would, that whatever percentage he gets transferring to say, Warren, Klobuchar, Biden might boost them in some places. That's the risk that I see. Just, if Warren ends up having, a bunch of places where she finishes 15, 20% and Buttigieg kind of just collapses and his voters are set,
right.
Only 10 or 15% of them like Bernie. So I could see that as a possible warning.
I got to tell you that from my perspective, Bernie winning by 15 points, let's say, I'm just throwing out numbers, and Biden coming in second is less preferable to Bernie winning by 4 and Biden coming in fourth.
Yeah, that's one other thing that I haven't seen mentioned much is there's been a significant downtick in Biden's electability, especially against Trump in the past 3-4 weeks.
I just think that because at that point, here's my thinking on that is that the electability argument because in Iowa, all those things can happen, what you just talked about, right? Where 15% can make a huge difference. Crossing a 15 or 16% threshold can make a huge difference. And that's the case in terms of viability in all the primaries, in terms of whether you pick up delegates. But I think the big question is who's more electable right now going forward for like South Carolina? Who's more electable? Is it Bernie or is it Biden? And I think if Bernie wins South Carolina or comes within a point of Biden, I mean, I think that's basically, forget about it because he's creeping up in Texas too. And if he's
actually creeping up in South Carolina, Sam. They're just a poll, not to interrupt, but this poll just came out.
5 points. Yeah.
Down 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's my theory, but who knows? But we'll see. And Mike, if you have any, you're going to be twitching tonight anyways, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll be starting my show. Typically I start around 2:33 on twitch.tv/Huncho_committee. And everybody, if you're interested in Twitch, is a really good web platform, and the majority report's on Twitch as well. So
yes, I'm
check it
aware of
out.
that. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Mike.
No problem.
Talk to you later. Bye.
See ya.
Oh, and I should tell you that it was actually Ethiopians. That's in the Atumva satellite precinct. It's the first Iowa precinct to caucus today. This is from Brianne Fenstyle on Twitter. I think she's a reporter.
Dallas Morning Register.
From the Dallas Morning, the Des Moines Register, I would bet.
Sorry.
And they kick off. It was Ethiopian immigrants who work at the local pork processing plant in the evenings, and they are Sanders voters. So let's go. We got a lot of callers, folks. You got to bear with me. Calling from a 515 area code. We're going to try and get people who are in Iowa. 515, you there?
Hi, Sam. This is Alec in Des Moines, Iowa. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm sorry. What's your name? Al?
Alec.
Alec in Des Moines. What's on your mind, Alec?
Well, I was just checking in. You had a guest last week who was talking about potential capacity issues. I am in a precinct with only one place to go caucus. I was wondering how big of a concern that was. I'm going to get there as early as I can, but just kind of made me nervous as far as getting in and getting counted.
Yeah, I think getting there as early as possible is going to make a big difference because if anybody's going to be turned away, obviously, it's going to be people who get there late.
Okay.
I mean, look, it's probably a difference of about a half an hour. And if you're there within a half an hour, you can send out reports to people who you are anticipating coming and letting them know. And, if you're listening to this show and you're planning on it, the way that I approach these things in everything I do in life is like that 30 minutes, whatever I'm going to be doing before then, this is presuming you can get out of work if that's an issue. Those 30 minutes, am I going to regret it more sitting there waiting, or am I going to regret it more if I get boxed out?
I'll do just that. I'll be there at 6.
All right. Well, give us a call. We're going to be on air sometime shortly after that. And if you want to give us a call from the line, if you're not organizing with people, but and call in during the show.
Absolutely.
All right. And your name's Alec. Is that it? Okay.
Yep.
All right, Alec. Call in during the show and let us know what's up. We're going to give first dibs to people from Iowa. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Calling from a 404 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is CJ from Atlanta.
CJ from Atlanta. What's on your mind?
Hi, just want to give you a quick update. It's a little off topic again, but I called in a couple, last week about the animation I did of the I'm with Busey.
Oh, geez. Yeah?
Yeah, and so you said to let you know when it was up. So if you search Gary Busey's Campfire Game on YouTube, you'll find the animation if you want to check it out. Thought you might like it, so let me know what you think. Also, keep some White Claws handy in case Chapo Trap House bombs you guys while you're live on Twitch.
Well, they're in Iowa. So we're going to hear from...
Oh, they're in Iowa. Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Virgil, I think. But I have a feeling that, we're going to be... So it's Gary Busey, and what is it? Campfire?
Gary Busey's Campfire Game.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Check
Matt.
it out, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Let's see. I go down. I think we got a precinct captain on hold. If I can find it. Calling from a 405 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name's Andrew. I'm calling from about mile marker 200 in Iowa.
All right. And what's going on there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. For some reason, it's just not coming through very well.
All right. Well, we can hear you okay.
Oh, perfect. Well, yeah, so I'm here. I've been here since Saturday morning, and things are looking about as well as humanly possible.
Tell us, what have you seen?
So far, so I was in the Iowa City area on the east side, and we had to end up going to rural southeast Iowa down to the Fort Madison area just to find doors that we hadn't knocked on yet. And I was outside of Des Moines yesterday and earlier today, and they've completely run out of Des Moines addresses. They've knocked every door twice. And so I've met people from at least 15 countries, pretty much every state, have come and just converged to mix with a whole bunch of Iowans, too. Everywhere we go, there's also Iowans with us. So it's been a really good experience.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, and so what are you doing tonight? I mean, you obviously can't caucus, right? You're not an Iowan.
No. Yeah, no. So I'm from Oklahoma, and so what we can do is we're precinct captains. Each campaign gets to nominate or appoint somebody, preferably somebody who is an Iowan. But in some of the smaller, more remote areas, we don't have an identified person. And so I'll be going out to a small town near Grinnell College, and we do the 2-minute speeches at the beginning and then kind of work the math and organize everybody for making sure we get counted and making sure we get as many delegates as possible. And then hopefully if I get there and there's an Iowan who would prefer to do it, then we can just hand over the reins and teach them, kind of the procedure of how to do it.
That's interesting. So in those areas where, I mean, presumably, right, that's the least, there's the least amount of support because you don't have somebody who's contacted the campaign and been active enough to be in a position to wanting to be the precinct captain. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go
700 precincts.
Right. How many fall into that category? I'm
not sure. We've had to go to pretty far out areas to have ones that we don't have designated like native Iowans doing it. So I imagine it's not a huge percentage. The majority of them are staffed and ready to go.
Interesting. All right. Well, will you call in?
Understanding. I'm not on the campaign.
No,
so,
I understand. All right. Will you call in and just tell us your experience after you're done?
Oh, I'd love to.
All right. Great. We will be on the lookout for you tonight. And
hey, no worries.
Okay, and we'll make a notation on your 405 number that you're precinct captain. All right.
Hey, well, thanks a lot.
All right,
thanks for doing the show.
Appreciate the call.
Bye.
This is awesome. We have a whole team of correspondents in Iowa calling from an 847 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Thanks, Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. What's on your mind, Josh?
Well, I actually did. I was in Iowa last week, as I said before. I wasn't here this week, but I can attest to what Mike from PA is saying. That they were literally giving us. They're basically saying we have to draw up new turfs for you because we've knocked this town essentially. The words they use dry. They were running out of doors for us to knock. And I'll also say that. Apparently that Des Moines Register poll did actually leak, and I'm not going to say what the leaked poll showed, except it did show. Well, it showed Bernie up double digits. I'll just say that. I don't. Although I think the mentality of the campaign is this is a very tight race. But to me, that actually seems pretty plausible to me. And they say they have as many committed caucus goers as they did in 2016. And especially with what looks like to be the attendance of the caucus to be around the 2008 level of 240,000 or more. I mean, I'm looking. I think Bernie could get, I think, somewhere between 29 to 33%, which is, I think, likely of where I think he's going to land. And I think you could see a double-digit victory. I mean, I think people need to treat this as if it is a very close race. But I think it's looking really good, and I think it's because they got in there and they organized immediately from day one. Yeah. And I think what a lot of people didn't realize is that in 2016 he didn't run to win as a candidate. In fact, like he finally figured out he had an opportunity.
Dude, how many times do I have to say that over the course of the past 3 years?
Oh, I know, but like people keep forgetting this. Like people try to bring the DNC, people try to bring in all this other stuff. And the fact is, like, they just didn't have a serious organization there in 2016. Yeah. And the difference, just being around there and having been around the campaign in 2016 was just like mind-blowing, like mind-boggling. Like I think they were just so well organized, and it was just really such a well-oiled machine that, I mean, again, I don't want to be overconfident.
All right. Well, Josh, I appreciate the phone call. We'll see tonight. Appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye. I mean, I think there's two factors, right? One that takes away from his numbers and one that adds to his numbers. In 2016, people were not just voting for Bernie Sanders. They were voting for Bernie Sanders because they wanted him to win. They were voting for Bernie Sanders because they wanted his message to have more prominence in the Democratic Party, anticipating that he would not win. And they voted for Bernie Sanders because they were voting against Hillary Clinton. So there's 2/3 of his support. Now, I don't know what the actual breakdown is, but there's two buckets of support for him that aren't active this time, right? That aren't in his favor. But he also had no organization last time. So now they are actually finding everybody who could potentially support him or persuading people to support him, and they're bringing them on, and that makes a big difference. All right, a couple more calls that I think we have from Iowa. This is so helpful, Kyle, that I can go back down and see these numbers here. Calling from a 563 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it is. Who is me in this instance?
This is Matt from Davenport.
Matt from Davenport. What's on your mind?
I just had a hypothetical for you. Hypothetically speaking, this person I know doesn't live in Iowa anymore. He's still registered to vote in Iowa, and he doesn't live that far away. Do you think he could come and caucus? I don't know.
I think it would be a mistake for your friend to do that, because the value of that one vote and caucus relative to the potential downside of another campaign, rightly, or a campaign, an election official saying, hey, that guy is cheating, is just not worth it. That's what I would tell your friend.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. So
well, you and I are on the same page. Tell your friend not to do it. Not appropriate.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
But they can drive people to the polls. They can help out.
Yeah, definitely.
And in fact, doing that and people saying, how come you're not voting? And say, well, I'm still registered here, but that would be wrong, shows a certain amount of integrity that probably also might have value.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
The youth of America. It's good to see they have morals. I like to hear that. Ethics. Calling from a 712 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Dwayne from Sioux City.
Dwayne from Sioux City, Iowa. Welcome to the program.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Sam. A little bit earlier, you mentioned that how it was going to work for people to be able to get into the caucus, and the rule is at 7 o'clock, anybody that is in line can still come in, but then they put like a spacer in the line, and anybody who shows up after 7 o'clock cannot get in, just so everybody knows.
Now, what happens, though, if you have a situation where we're just over capacity, that the line stretches around the block and there's only, the fire department says you can only have, 500 people in here, and we got 700 people who are in line?
That's a great question.
That's why I say get there early. Get there early.
Yeah,
take that
absolutely.
extra half an hour. Be the guy or be the woman sitting in the chair like the kids line up for the pop-up shops around here to get the sneakers.
Yes, sir.
All
And the thing is, they're gonna tell people that, and we've been telling people that for months now. Every time we've been out canvassing, we've been telling people to get there at 6:30. 6:30 has always been the number that the Bernie campaign has been put out. So, and I think it's getting through. I went out canvassing yesterday, and the canvassing area was kind of all over the city. So clearly they're just grabbing, they're not getting them in discrete geographic areas anymore. They're just picking up whatever's left over. So
great.
And it's been really great. I got to say 75% of the people are saying they're voting for Bernie or they're still undecided, which as far as I'm concerned means they're voting for Bernie. So
Well, I will tell you right now, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, that means that you are in a different category of voter or caucuser than the people that you're going out and convincing. And I would say 6:10. Get there at 6:15. The extra 15 minutes, what are you going to do at home? What are you going to do? You going to watch Chris Matthews for 15 more minutes before you get out the door? Just go. Get there 6:15.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for calling, man. Hey, call in if you got something interesting going down in your thing. Call in during the show tonight.
I will. I'm precinct organizer for my precinct, which I live in.
Do that first.
We got
obviously.
we got 7 delegates, and I want to deliver every one of those for Bernie. That's going to be my goal tonight. So.
All right. Let us know how you did.
I will.
Call and let us know.
I will try calling back in. Yep.
All right. Bye-bye. Let's do one or two. Let's do this TLIB thing and get it over with. So Hillary Clinton, as you know, made her, has been for the past several weeks going out talking about her documentary, trying to sell the documentary, and knows that the way that she's going to get into the news is to inject herself as to where the news is, and has been going around and saying nobody likes Bernie personally. He's a bad person. And he was responsible for us not winning the election. No word as to whether she got into a fight with Rachel Maddow about this. Let's play this. This is a clip of Rachel Maddow from 2016 in which Rachel Maddow, in real time, talks about how Bernie Sanders is completely not being helpful to Hillary Clinton in her race for the presidency in 2016. Here's Rachel Maddow making that point. Wow, gosh, this must have been, I don't know when this report was specifically. It was in October? Okay. So here it is. I don't know.
There was this lingering question at the end of the Democratic primary as to whether or not Bernie Sanders really meant it when he endorsed Hillary Clinton, whether he really meant it when he said he would work his heart out all over the country to get her elected. Well, he's been working his heart out. It's true. He started campaigning for Clinton really in earnest, basically as a full-time gig a couple of weeks ago. He appears really to be flooring it for Hillary Clinton. Over the first 5 days, Bernie Sanders spent on the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton. Over 5 days, he did 14 events for her. Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, 14 events in 5 days. Yesterday and today and tonight, he's stumping for Hillary Clinton in Colorado. On Wednesday, he's going to Nevada for her. Tomorrow, though, he is spending all day and all night in Red State, Arizona. Bernie Sanders doing a rally for Clinton tomorrow in Flagstaff at 2:30. Then he's doing another rally for Clinton in Tucson at 7.
There's a couple of things I take from that. One, that for whatever reason, Rachel Maddow must have been out of her mind thinking that Bernie Sanders was trying to help and was going full out to help Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election. But now everybody knows that Rachel Maddow is a huge Bernie bro. So you can only take that with a grain of salt. What's also interesting about that, and a little bit disturbing, is they initially sent Sanders to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania early on. A couple of weeks ago, so this would have been back in September. Okay? Then they started to go out to Arizona. They sent him out to the Southwest. We know that the campaign basically thought that they were going to win those Southwestern states. So they had a chance there, and they were actually going into red territory because they had it so sewn up. If they had been doing proper field work and the people who created the models, the techs, have not been held to account. I haven't even seen any big reporting on this. And they should be, because they're floating around. They're going to attach to some candidate. If they were doing their proper jobs, they would have not sent Bernie Sanders down to Arizona. Although he may have some resonance there. They would have kept circling him around, Wisconsin and Michigan and down to Pennsylvania. Because the idea that he couldn't have gotten maybe another 10,000, 5,000, I mean, who knows? That was a campaign that screwed up in about 1 million different ways. So just keep that in mind. All right. So people should refer to that, what we just spoke about in terms of Rachel Maddow in real time back in 2016 saying how much Bernie Sanders was campaigning around for Hillary Clinton. And how much he was going full out, and how much, she couldn't have been more exuberant about it. And this is relevant because Hillary Clinton is now on a tour, ostensibly to sell her documentary, and all she's doing is taking pot shots at Bernie Sanders, or at least that's the way that she's getting into the press. And she knows that. That's part of their media strategy. She may or may not believe it. I don't know which is worse, to be honest with you. That Hillary Clinton does not believe that Bernie Sanders was really the reason why she lost and that he's a bad guy, but they need publicity for the documentary and that's the only thing that's resonating. Or that she does believe that and she's going around saying this. In both instances, we have been told that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the country. I happen to think that to some extent that's true. Certainly he's an existential threat to immigrants, to people of color, broadly speaking, to children of immigrants, to, I don't know, we're putting out new landmines. We're rolling that back. There's only one place in the world that we keep landmines, and that is in South Korea to protect against the land invasion from North Korea. Other than that, we are no longer deploying landmines because of what they do to people. Donald Trump is reversing that. Donald Trump is going to block grant Medicaid. That's going to throw tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands, off of Medicaid. If Joe Biden became the nominee, I would be supporting Joe Biden because of those reasons and more. Pete Buttigieg. These are people I think, honestly, make me nauseous. The way that I articulate this stuff is a function of who I know is going to be listening to me. All right. I mean, this is the problem why I had a problem with Jimmy Dore, with his Hillary Clinton has a Parkinson's disease during the last primary. I don't care who Jimmy Dore votes for. But if you've got a platform where 150,000 people are going to watch your video and you're going out there and hitting over and over again, I hold you responsible. You're not running for president. And you have every right to vote for who you want to vote for. But if you're going out there and you're spewing garbage to create some type of narrative that is going to bring us Donald Trump, I hold you to account. I don't care if your name is Jimmy Dore or Hillary Clinton. People are like, who cares about Hillary Clinton? She's not running for president. I understand she's not running for president, but there are still literally millions of people who base their opinions of Democratic candidates based upon what she says. And so she's out there. It's not like a one-off. This isn't like she's in a moment of like, I understand it. Like, I'm knee deep into an interview, and it's like, oh, you've asking me a direct question, and I'm trying to avoid it, and I've had a tough day. And I say, well, Bernie could have done better. Whatever. This is like the third time now in the course of 2 weeks she's done this. This is what we call an ad, like a marketing campaign at best. So this story comes up. They're in Iowa. You've got the squad plus, I guess. I don't know. Is Jayapal in the squad?
I think she's in the squad.
The spirit of the squad.
Jayapal, Omar, and Tlaib. And I don't know who's interviewing him, but somebody said something about Hillary Clinton. And people in the audience boo because she's attacking the candidate. And this is what happens.
Someone by the name of Hillary Clinton said that nobody, we're not going to boo. We're classy here. We're classy. I'll boo. Boo. You all know I can't be quiet. No, we're going to boo. That's all right. The haters will shut up on Monday when we win.
All right. So now that is consistent with Tlaib, right? I mean, she was the one who first came out. We're going to impeach the MFer. It turns out she was right. They did. She came out with a statement subsequent to that. I characterized it as an apology on Twitter. I think maybe that was more than what she did. I think she expressed regret that she said that. Large part because it's going to take, it is splitting focus. And I would say that, first of all, she was right to put out that statement. A lot of people, you can't apologize. Look, if you are there are people who are associated with the campaign who are going to be under a greater amount of scrutiny. Now, the campaign, Faz Shakir, who is the campaign manager, tweeted at Tlaib, don't worry, you're good with us. Everybody did exactly as far as what they should have done. I don't know if she should have said that or not. Probably it would be better not to on some level. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. But I think the bottom line is that, like, there is no point in exerting political capital on stuff that doesn't get you material benefit. If anybody should understand this, it should be people who are involved with the Sanders campaign. Right? Like, the rhetorical stuff is good. I think maybe, a better response would have been like, somebody please chain my mouth. Like saying, like, I want to boo her, but I'm not going to. So that everybody gets the message and this and that. I think, in a perfect world, people respond, I can't believe what she's doing in saying these things. I don't think we should boo, but I got to tell you, as someone who, cares about getting Donald Trump out of office, I can't believe she's doing and saying these things. Because, frankly, look, Hillary Clinton needs to be discredited at this point because she has influence with a certain number of people. And she's going out there for whatever reason and potentially harming the next nominee. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't say she's not running for president. Who cares what she says? Because look, if another candidate is doing that, they're running and they have a vested interest. But she's acting like she's a candidate. She still has influence in the party. And if she's going to take these pot shots, then it should be addressed. I just don't know if a surrogate is the best person to do that because of the game that they play. Because then you see all these people come on to MSNBC and say, like, I just don't like seeing a woman criticize another woman. What? What? Seriously? What? Give me a break. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. But I would say that Tlaib was expressing the feelings of a lot of people. I can tell you that now. And I think, like, Clinton should really just, she can do whatever she wants, but don't come out and say, like, it's wrong for people to criticize her for saying that nobody likes Bernie Sanders, possible, the front runner in the Democratic Party. I mean, give me a break.
I can't stand how the defense always just goes to, well, she has the right to say this, or she's a private citizen. Come on.
Does anybody believe that what she's doing is not political or marketing or whatever it is? Like, honestly, this is not somebody overheard a private conversation. This is either her specifically trying to sink Sanders for ideological reasons, or doing it, which I think is actually more justifiable, at least from her perspective, than, like, I'm just still mad at him. Like, you know what? You have a role to play in politics, and enabling Donald Trump should not be it. You can choose whichever one you want, but everybody else has the responsibility to call it out too. All right, look, folks, we're going to be done. This was supposed to be a short show today. I blew it. We're going to be back in about 5 hours, probably around 7:30 Eastern time. We'll turn the voicemail on, and if you are in Iowa and you have something interesting to say, leave us a voicemail, and we'll go through them. But if you're not, and, we're going to take Iowa. We're going to be Iowa-centric tonight. So don't call from Florida and say, this is like, I got some thoughts on Iowa. No, I want people from Iowa. Florida, you'll have your opportunity, I promise you. All right. See you tonight.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive